Welcome and good afternoon. This is Commish Orr, and today we're going to take a look at the top 5 National League teams from the 1930s. When I say top 5, there's a little caveat to that. Only one team from a franchise can be in the list, so you can't have 5 Yankees teams or whatever, for example. Of course, those wouldn't be in the National League, but so I'm looking at the top 5 National League teams from the 1930s. And this is because I'm going to be doing a tournament with these teams using season ticket baseball. And so I will go in reverse order of the top 5 teams. I am using for this list the 538's ELO ratings, which rates every team in Major League history from 1903 to 2015. And so I'm going to give you the top 5 teams here, starting with number 5, the number 5 seed in the tournament. And I will give you their rank among the top 2,374 team seasons from 1903 to 2015. And then we'll go into a little detail about who's on these teams so you can see who will be competing in the tournament. I will make another video for the American League. I'm using 10 teams, 5 American and 5 National League teams. There will be a best of 5 play-in game or play-in series to get into a 4-team double elimination tournament in the American League and the National League that will eventually crown the top AL and NL teams from the 1930s who will face off in the best of the 30s World Series. So, with all that said, starting at number 5, the number 5 seed in the tournament will be the 1938 Pittsburgh Pirates. They are the 535th ranked team out of 2,374. The 1938 Pirates finished 86-64-2 in 1938. They finished second in the National League behind the Chicago Cubs. Home ballpark for the Pirates that year was Forbes Field, and their manager was Pie Traynor, former major leaguer at that point. And if you want to see some of their top players, we have Arky Vaughan, their number 1 player here, Pep Young, Johnny Rizzo, Russ Bowers, the Wayner brothers, of course. And a little bit more about the team is that they were in first place on September 1st, but went 12-16-1 the rest of the season and got overtaken by the Chicago Cubs on September 28th on Gabby Hartnett's homer in the Gloamin'. So, a little bit more about their players that year. Here's kind of their position players, their normal position players. You had Al Todd catching, Gus Surr first base, Pep Young at second, Arky Vaughan at short, Lee Handley at third, and then the outfield was made up of Johnny Rizzo and Lloyd and Paul Wayner. Starting pitchers were Russ Bowers, Jim Tobin, Cy Blanton, Bob Klinger, and they got some starts also out of Red Lucas. Bill Swift was another starter or another pitcher of theirs. Another interesting thing about the Pirates that year is the coaching staff. As I mentioned, Pie Traynor was the manager, but part of the coaching staff was none other than Honus Wagner. A very aged Honus Wagner here. So that's number 5. Heading on to number 4. The number 4 seed National League team is the 1939 Cincinnati Reds, coming in at number 294 on the best teams list. In 1939, the Reds were 97-57-2. They finished in first place in the National League, but lost in the World Series when they got swept by the Yankees that year. Bill McKechnie was their manager, and they played their home games at Crosley Field. A couple of their top players here. Bucky Walters, Lonnie Fry, Billy Myers, Ivor Goodman, Frank McCormick, Paul Derringer. 1939 Cincinnati Reds won by 4.5 games over the St. Louis Cardinals that year. They did, as I mentioned, go on to the World Series, but lost when they got swept by the New York Yankees. During the season, Paul Derringer and Bucky Walters became the last pitchers to win 25 games in a season for the Reds in the 20th century. So, their position players were Ernie Lombardi at catcher, Frank McCormick at first, Lonnie Fry at second, Billy Myers at short, Billy Werber at third, Ivor Goodman, Harry Kraft, and Wally Berger in the outfield. Starting pitchers were Bucky Walters, Paul Derringer, and Whitey Moore. Coming in at number 3, the number 3 seed of the best National League teams in the 1930s is the 1934 New York Giants. They were the 142nd best team in Major League history. They were 93-60 that year. They finished in second place in the National League, behind the St. Louis Cardinals. Bill Terry was their manager, and they played their home games at the Polo Grounds. Carl Hubble, the main star of that team, but Mel Ott, Bill Terry, Travis Jackson, a great set of players here. They led the standings for most of the season, but finished in second place. They had a 7-game lead on the Cardinals on September 6th, but went 8-13 the rest of the season, and lost the lead on the final day of the season, as the Cardinals went 18-5 during that last span. They are the first team in the modern era to lose the pennant after holding a 7-game lead in September. Their starters were Gus Mancuso at catcher, Bill Terry at first, Huey Kritz at second, Johnny Vergez at third base, Travis Jackson at short, and the outfielders Mel Ott, JoJo Moore, and George Watkins. Starting pitchers, you had Carl Hubble, of course, Al Shoemaker, Freddie Fitzsimmons, and Roy Parmalee. One key thing that happened that year is in the All-Star game, Carl Hubble struck out 5 future Hall of Famers in a row at the Polo Grounds, striking out Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Jimmy Fox in the first inning, and starting the second by striking out Al Simmons and Joe Cronin. The number 2 best National League team of the 1930s is the 1931 St. Louis Cardinals, who were ranked 75th all-time. They were 101-53 that year, finishing first in the National League, and they won the World Series over the Philadelphia Athletics. Gabby Street was their manager and played their home games at Sportsman's Park. Some of their top players in 1931, Chick Hafey, Frankie Frisch, Charlie Gilbert, Bill Hallahan, Syl Johnson, Jim Bottomley. Frankie Frisch won the MVP award that year, hitting .311 with just 4 homers and 82 RBI. Their starting position players were Jimmy Wilson catching, Jim Bottomley at first, Frankie Frisch at second, Charlie Gilbert at short, Sparky Adams at third, and outfielders George Watkins, Chick Hafey, and Pepper Martin. Bill Hallahan and Burley Grimes were starting pitchers, though Paul Derringer was also a starter for them. Flint Rem, Syl Johnson, Jesse Haynes. Part of the Gas House Gang, though Dizzy Dean wasn't quite on the team yet. I believe he was in the 1934 maybe. Finally, we head to the number 1 seed for the 1930 National League, or 1930s National League, and that is the 1935 Chicago Cubs, the 54th best team in Major League history through 2016. They were 154 and finished first in the National League, but they lost the World Series to the Detroit Tigers that year. Managed by Charlie Grimm, they played, of course, at Wrigley Field, even back then. A couple of their key players, Billy Herman, Augie Gallen, Stan Hack, Gabby Hartnett, Lon Warnicki, Larry French, Chuck Klein. They had, memorably, a 21-game winning streak in 1935. That streak started on September 4th. Cubs were 2.5 games out of first place. And they wouldn't lose again until September 28th. The streak took them all the way to the World Series. Tied the franchise and Major League record set in 1880, when they were known as the Chicago White Stockings. Gabby Hartnett was the first National League catcher to win the MVP award that year. Their starting position players were Gabby Hartnett catching, Phil Cavaretta at first, Billy Herman at second, Stan Hack at third, Billy Jurgis at short, and outfielders Chuck Klein, Augie Gallen, and Frank Damari. Starting pitchers Lon Warnicki, Bill Lee, Larry French, Tex Carlton, and Roy Henshaw. So, those are your top 5 seeded National League teams that will be in the 1930s Best of the Decade tournament. Once again, I will do another video with the top 5 American League teams soon. That kind of gives you an idea as to the seeding. So the number 4 and number 5, the Reds, the 39 Reds, and the 38 Pirates will play in a best of 5 play-in series, the winner of which will enter the double-elimination bracket, tournament bracket, where we will have the best of 5 series leading to a best of 7 National League Championship game or series, the winner of which will go on to the best of the 30s World Series against the winner in the American League. So, stay tuned for that action using Season Ticket Baseball. Check out baseballmaelstrom.com if you want to follow the action. And if you have any comments or questions, leave those down below. We'd love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, have a great evening.